Right, I think that should do. So, good afternoon, all. My name is Will. I'm a member of the Coral Expeditions sales team. I'm actually based down in hot and humid Brisbane, whereas the Coral Expeditions head office and most of my colleagues are based up in Cairns. And today you're joining us to have a bit of a watch and listen of one of my favourite kind of Coral Expedition destinations or cruise series on the small islands of Japan. So we just completed our inaugural trip this year up through the islands of the Philippines, Micronesia, and Japan. And this is going to be our second iteration, basically, sailing aboard Coral Geographer, our newest vessel, which I'll come on to shortly, in September to October next year. So look, I appreciate that most people joining us today are going to be, have cruised with Coral Expeditions previously. Most kind of first timers pick one of our, domestic destinations, usually Kimberley, Tasmania or beyond, before jumping onto these, big chunky international itineraries. But for those of you who are new to Coral, I just want to give a relatively brief overview of kind of who we are and what we do. And again, for those of you who have cruised and sailed with Coral Expeditions previously, please bear with me. It will only take a couple of minutes and then we'll get on to the crux of the presentation. But in short, for 40 years now, Coral has operated with a single purpose, to take small groups of like-minded explorers to really remote wilderness places with expert guidance and that warm Australian hospitality. We are an Australian-owned company. We sail under the Australian flag. And for those of you who obviously have cruised with us previously, you'll be aware that we've got a fully Australian crew, admittedly with a few Kiwis scattered amongst them. So what is the expedition experience? The whole ethos of Coral is to focus on the destinations, not the ships. So it's a very different prospect from some of those big ship cruise lines out there. It's a very relaxed onboard atmosphere. So we have no assigned seating, there's no dressing for dinner, and there's no formal entertainment outside of our full schedule of lectures from our guest speakers or guest lecturers and our expedition leader team. Which is right here in the slide. So depending on the area, be it Kimberley, Tasmania, Raja Ampat, or here in the islands of Japan, we run this full schedule of lectures, and it's designed to provide you guys as our guests, an understanding, a deep understanding of the history, cultures, flora, fauna, art of the diverse areas that we go to. Obviously completely optional, you don't have to attend, but the type of guests that Coral Expeditions appeals to are the type of people that, like I say, want to go to these epic destinations, both domestic and international, but they want to learn and really kind of connect with the destinations that we go to. All of our expeditions, from the Kimberley and domestic right through to our big international itineraries, are led by our expert expedition team on board. Many of you might recognize Ian Morris on the screen there, one of our most experienced expedition team, and they will accompany you obviously on all shore excursions, no matter where you go, and they're more than happy to answer any questions, and feed your knowledge both on board but also, like I say, ashore in the very varied destinations that we travel to. For those of you who have cruised with us previously, and I'm assuming probably most of you joining us today, you're going to be more than aware of our Explorer tenders. And if you're not, if you are new to Coral and you take away one thing from this presentation, it's probably this slide. Our Explorer tenders are utterly unique to Coral Expeditions. So we have designed and built these ourselves, and they provide the perfect conduit between our kind of mothership vessels and the epic and very varied destinations that we visit. We also operate, a full complement of the more traditional Zodiac inflatables, which I'll come on to shortly. And we use these in conjunction with each other to provide that true kind of expedition experience and something that no other cruise line, domestic or international, can offer. These Explorer tenders can fit our entire ship's complement. So on our two largest ships, of which Coral Adventurer and Coral Geographer, and it's Coral Geographer, our newest vessel, which again I'll come on to shortly, which we're going to be using for this particular cruise series later next year. So our two newest vessels have two of these Explorer tenders. They're really easy to board. Excuse me. Direct off one of the main decks, and then they're hydraulically lowered into the water, and then away you go. Comfortable padded seating. They've got a full intercom system so that our expedition team can kind of keep you guys aware of some of the, you know, the I suppose the history and of the various places we go to. They're perfect for beach and harbour landings. Harbour, obviously nice and easy, but for beach, we've got a big drop-down ramp on the front. So for both wet and dry beach landings, it's super easy to do. We've got a couple of high-powered motors on the back, so we can cruise large distances in, you know, relatively short amounts of time. It's got a roof on as well, which is absolutely crucial. If you've cruised with us in the Kimberley, you'll understand this. You know, the baking tropical heat is going to be absolutely powerful, painful after, you know, multiple hours out on excursion. And obviously they'll double up and protect you from the rain as well. And one of the crucial things is that they've got an onboard toilet there tucked away at the back, and that might not seem like a big deal, but it removes the need to constantly head back to the mothership for, you know, those regular toilet breaks, which is going to kind of really break up your expedition or shore time. And it also, you know, avoids the need to have a dip in the ocean or nip behind the closest push, basically. But they're absolutely crucial in how Coral Expeditions delivers that true expedition product. We use them in the Kimberley and all of our domestic itineraries, and on every one of our international itineraries as well. But as mentioned, we also use these in conjunction with the more traditional Zodiac inflatables. And it's up to you guys as our guests, where applicable, to kind of pick and choose how adventurous or not, depending on the day, how adventurous you want to be. So onto the ship, Coral Geographer. As mentioned, I think it's our newest vessel. So launched in early 2021. She's a sister ship to Coral Adventurer, which many of you might have cruised on previously. So all you really need to know about Coral Geographer is it's got an absolute maximum onboard capacity of 120 guests, spread across 60 staterooms. So all of our staterooms are outward facing. All our staterooms are en suite, and as you can see from the picture there, many come with private balconies as well. So all of our vessels, and we have 3 vessels in the Coral fleet, have been kind of purpose built to provide that kind of true expedition experience. So shallow draft, they've got onboard stabilizers, which is quite rare for a ship of this size. So again, they're purpose built to undertake these, you know, big blue ocean voyages that we're going to be doing with this trip up through Micronesia, Japan, and back down through the Philippines. I don't have time in this presentation. We've got a lot of content to cover across the 3 itineraries we're going to be covering today. Please jump online. We've got detailed ship layouts, maps, images, videos, you name it. Jump on the website and please peruse to your heart's content. So moving on to our guest speaker today. So John joined us a few months ago, actually, to have our first kind of Japan webinar series, which some of you might have joined. He joined us for, I think, a couple of the segments of the recent Japan voyages, and he's a true expert on Japan, and quite frankly, the perfect example of a Coral Expedition guest lecturer. He's lived, worked, and traveled extensively throughout Japan, speaks the language, and has even translated old Japanese poetry, I believe. He, after studying in Japan and Australia, John began his career at the Australia-Japan Research Centre before joining Ansett Australia, I believe, establishing flights into Osaka. And later he was the CEO of News Corps over in Japan. He now lives in Sydney, but has continued his interest in matching texts about ancient, natural and contemporary history with his walking, which I believe is a particular passion of his, both in Australia and Japan. He was made a member of the Order of Australia for his support of the Australian-Japan cultural and business links, and has been supporting young artists and art institutions, I believe. And just a little nugget, John, which I found out from just perusing your bio prior to this meeting that you're also a licensed tea master with the Omotesenki school, and I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. But look, welcome, John, and thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thanks, Will.
So let's move swiftly on. We're going to be covering 3 of the very kind of Japan-focused itineraries. For those of you who have been looking online at this expedition cruise series, it's actually the small islands of Japan and the Philippines. We've broken up the presentation because the content is just so huge, basically. In a kind of 45-50-minute presentation, we just wouldn't be able to provide that kind of depth of overview. So we've broken it up. The Philippines is going to be treated differently, and please keep an eye on the website if you're interested in those specific destinations. But we're going to be focusing on the 3 Japan specific itineraries on this particular webinar. So without further ado, moving on to our first itinerary, the journey to Japan. 15 nights Yap to Tokyo, departing in September next year. So before I get onto the highlights of that, and as I've just mentioned, all of our trips, you know, are connected in some way. If any of you out there are listening today who are looking for a you know, a more extended, let's call it, trip up to Japan and beyond, this is the itinerary that we have leading up to Yap, and then if needs be, you can continue from Yap on up to Tokyo as required. It's our West Papua, Raja Ampat and Micronesia trip, 16 nights, Darwin to Yap. And if you guys out there listening today are interested in the absolute stunning beauty, particularly marine beauty and underwater worlds of Raja Ampat and Micronesia, then this is potentially a perfect little add-on trip for you guys. I'm not going to go into any detail on it today. Please jump on the website and again, full detailed itineraries, images, videos, peruse as required. But like I say, Darwin to Yap, and this is the trip immediately before the Yap to Tokyo that we're going to be covering soon. So before we go any further, so you're going to be starting the trip in Yap with a few days spent in what can only be described as, you know, a tropical, you know, paradise. Ulithi Atoll is a coral reef so tiny and so remote that it's often left off maps altogether, and it's easy to miss as you're sailing across the Pacific. It's shaped like an oblong amoeba, 15 miles wide and 20 miles long. The reef is a ring of about 40 islets, of which only 4 are inhabited, and they rise barely 3 foot, I think, above sea level, and the entire landmass put together amounts to a little over 1,000 acres. Our visit allows time for swimming, snorkeling and scuba activities, as well as learning about the World War II history, mainly tied to the atoll's deep, calm waters at the center of the lagoon. It's actually one of the largest coral reef lagoons in the world, and it was perfect as so vast that it was perfect as a naval base for the Americans during World War II, as it plotted its final approach to the Japanese home islands. So again, you get to snorkel on coral reef gardens off a truly deserted islet in a really remote part of the world. You get to enjoy the tropical vista of white sand beaches, colourful coral reefs home to sea turtles, coconut crabs and seabirds, and a myriad of fish and underwater life. There's an opportunity to visit the Ulithi Turtle Project and also visit the vibrant community village on one of the islets there. So on Sorrel Atoll, again, a short little cruise from Ulithi. It's stunningly beautiful, but absolutely tiny. It's 12.5 kilometers long by up to about 3.5 kilometers wide, but its total land area is less than 1 square kilometers. But it encloses a 45-meter deep lagoon, and again, similar to Ulithi, it's all about getting in and under the water. So we get a chance to swim and snorkel, and in reality, it's the definition of a picture postcard tropical paradise island. So Faye's Island is a raised coral island in the eastern Caroline Islands, and it's the closest land to the Challenger Deep, which I'll come on to shortly, which is about 180 or so miles away. It has a fringing reef surrounding the island, and offers further opportunities to snorkel and dive the reef. And similar to Sorel and Ulithi atolls mentioned previously, it's an incredibly remote destination and remains completely untouched by tourism, and barring some World War II additions, can be viewed in its pristine state and will be a genuinely epic and beautiful last stop prior to the visit to or a visit over, I should say, the iconic Challenger Deep. So obviously I can't provide you with an accurate photo of the Challenger Deep, and I assure you we won't be going quite down that far. But just as a stopover on our way to Iwo Jima and the first of our Japanese islands, the Challenger Deep is the deepest known point to the seabed on Earth. Its depth's measured at around 11 or just under 11,000 meters. The captain will host a special event with each guest signing a mini kind of commemorative scroll, which is then placed into a steel pipe and dropped to the bottom of the ocean. If conditions permit, and if you're feeling braver than I certainly would be, you can enjoy an ocean swim with literally thousands of meters of water below you before the ship moves on to Iwo Jima and the first of our Japanese small islands, and where I officially hand over to John and for him to use his Japanese expertise. So over to you, John, and we'll keep going.
Great, thanks, Will. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think it's 11,000 meters deep at Challenger Deep, so the deepest trench in the world, the Mariana Trench. I'd love to go for that swim myself, but it's a great way to approach Japan. I will do this cruise sometime through the Ogasawara Islands, which are the furthest south islands of Tokyo metropolis, and then up through the Izu Islands. But Iwo Jima is the most southerly island of Tokyo metropolis, and just above it are the Bornean Islands. Now, this is really sacred ground. It was the site of the first great land battle in World War II between the US and Japan. Very heavy casualties. 21,000 Japanese troops based on the island were all killed. There were perhaps 200 captured at the end of the battle, who were basically had been unconscious, had not committed suicide at the end of the battle. There is a Japanese military base on the island today. It's a very restricted space, so the ship just sails past, but there are lectures about World War II when we start to think about Japanese history at this point. It was the highest single action loss for the US Marines, so it's sacred land for the US as well. But if you're on this cruise, I suggest you watch those two amazing films, The Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, produced by Clint Eastwood, and the amazing Japanese actor Ken Watanabe starred in the latter film. Okay, let's move on, Will. And we actually enter Japan clear customs at Shimizu, which is a beautiful port on the old Tokaido Highway, one of the old highways that I've walked many times, that linked old Edo or Tokyo with Kyoto. And we visit the Mount Fuji Heritage Center first and look at the geology of Mount Fuji, and people found it very interesting to look at how water is filtered through the volcanic rock and becomes very pure and comes out at the coastline, and so the area is famous for pure filtered water. And then we go up in a cable car to visit Kunozan Toshogu Shrine. Now, this is dedicated to the first great shogun of the Edo period. His government starts in 1603, and he brings the center of government to Edo and really establishes the history of the city of Tokyo. And this beautiful structure is his initial mausoleum. the third generation of the family moves his body to Nikko, north of Tokyo. But this is where it was first interred. The architecture of the building is very special. It's only used when a human has been deified, and you can see the family crest on the ends of the beautiful tiles. But this overlooks Suruga Bay, the deepest bay in Japan. The bay comes right off the slopes of Mount Fuji and plummets 2,200 meters into the sea. And this is sort of the epicenter of the plate action of where the Pacific plate meets the Philippine plate meets the Eurasian plate. So there's quite a lot of plate action going on in this area. Next slide, Will. And then we track back a little bit to the Izu Islands, which I mentioned before. And Oshima is the nearest of the 7 Izu Islands. It can be seen very easily from the mainland, but the good thing is that you also get great views back to the mainland, particularly of Mount Fuji. And there's a great hiking day on this day to climb up Mount Mihara, which is an active volcano. It erupted back in 1996, I think it was, and all 12,000 inhabitants of the island were all evacuated safely. Everyone survived, and you can still see where the lava flowed to the sea. Thanks, Will. And then we actually, we go down to Hachijojima, which is a delightful island full of interesting culture, drumming, and a very special dance. The drumming is actually taiko drumming, and some of you might have seen Taiko Oz perform in Australia, but their drumming, it comes from Sado Island on the Sea of Japan side of Japan, whereas the Hachijojima drumming is really freeform. It's very relaxed, and there are a lot of solo performances, very interesting to watch. And the dancing is also very lovely. And then we come back to Miyake-jima. Now, Oshima has beautiful black sand beaches, and the island is covered in camellias, whereas Miyake has white sand beaches and also has an active volcano and is home to, like Oshima, a lot of rare birds and plant life. And so a lot of the lectures are about these rare flora and fauna. Thanks, Will. And then we dock at Yokohama, and Yokohama is very close to the beautiful ancient warrior capital of Kamakura. Now, I mentioned the Edo period and the moving of the government to Edo, or Tokyo. The first time the warriors wrest control from the aristocrats is at the end of the 13th century, and the first family of warriors decide to completely remove their center of government from Kyoto and establish a very austere, beautiful warrior capital in Kamakura. And Kamakura is about 1 hour by local train down from Tokyo, but is very close to where we dock. And so it's full of Zen temples. This is when Sung Dynasty China collapses and all the Zen priests escape to Japan, and they build their temples in this capital of Kamakura. So they're very beautiful Zen temples, and this historic Buddha is in the center of that collection of Zen temples. Thanks, Will. And then the tour, the voyage ends in Tokyo. I think by the time you finish this cruise, you'll have had lectures and briefings about Japanese history. I can use an Edo period map, a 17th century map, to take you on a walk around Tokyo of today. So I think you'll be able to visit this city with an eye for history and not just see it as a huge, the most populous metropolis in the world. The 44 million people live in the commuting area that accesses Tokyo. It's a very exciting city, very modern, but also I think you'll have a much more refined eye for the history of the city. Thanks, Will.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the kind of through the heart of Japan, I meant to mention in my kind of preamble that if you guys listening in today have got any questions for either myself or John, please feel free to pop these into the chat function on your computer, and we'll happily try, between the two of us, we'll try and address these at the end of the presentation. But anyway, we'll keep moving on. So through the heart of Japan, 14 nights, Tokyo to Fukuoka, departing in September 2024. Over to you, John.
Okay, well, so let's just, immerse yourself in Japan's rich culture. It's truly that type of cruise. It's very culture-based. So there's not so much, scuba diving and snorkeling and swimming, but I think if you're interested in Japanese culture, this is an amazing cruise. And if you are interested in the scuba diving and snorkeling, perhaps it's an idea to marry this with the previous cruise or the next cruise through Okinawa. But many people on this year's cruise did that, and they were very happy. They were really pleased to have got a very firm understanding of Japanese culture before going on to the Okinawan Islands and enjoying all of the beautiful coral reefs of Okinawa. But as you can see, we visit Shimizu, a different visit to the previous trip, and onto Shingu, which is the center of the Kumano Kodo, the UNESCO heritage listed pilgrimage route, and we get out on the pilgrimage route. We visit the 3 sacred sites of the Kumano Kodo. It's the sister heritage pilgrimage with Camino de Santiago in Spain, and then on to Kyoto. You've got choices actually of the culture of Kyoto or the street life of Osaka, and then through the beautiful inland sea, famous for its art islands. We go to one of the art islands, Shodoshima, two towns on Shikoku, which is famous for the 88 temples pilgrimage, another world famous pilgrimage, and then back into the heavy history of World War II with Hiroshima. But we really experience the beauty of the rejuvenation of that city. Miyajima is one of the great beautiful spots of Japan. And then a fascinating look at Japan's links with the continent, with Korea and China. Tsushima really linked Korea with Japan. All of the continental culture flowed through Tsushima. Karatsu actually means the port facing China or the continent. We pop out into Korea and look at Korean culture, and then back to the Goto Islands, which I love. I'm determined to get on this part of the cruise, Will. The hidden Christian history of these islands is absolutely fascinating. And I've done many lectures and studied this culture for many, many years. And then back to Fukuoka. So let's continue, Will. So I think I've covered the rich culture of this trip. Next slide. Yes, so Kyoto. We do have an option of visiting Kyoto or Osaka. Kyoto is a beautiful city. It's 1.5 million population, and tourists have returned, and Kyoto is very good at welcoming tourists to its cultural icons. We have Japanese guides with us on this cruise and the next cruise. They were really wonderful. They were expert at explaining their culture. And then the guest lecturers travel with the buses, and we can sort of, if there are any questions or language difficulties, we can pick up and help and assist on those days. So the next slide, Will, is Osaka, the street life of Osaka. It's fantastic. We visit Osaka Castle, which was the great castle of the second great unifier of Japan, who was the general of Tokugawa Ieyasu, who takes over from him and moves to Edo or Tokyo. The castle is a reconstruction, but the gardens surrounding the castle are original and very, very beautiful. There is some modern landscape architecture in the gardens as well, which we explain. Street food of Osaka is very famous. and there's a bit of free time to get lost in the little alleys, and it was a really wonderful day. I enjoyed the Osaka day. Thanks, Will. Now we then sail into the beautiful inland sea of Japan. It's a very interesting sea, a very interesting tidal action. There's a 2-meter tidal differential between the Pacific Ocean and the inland sea, depending on the tide, and the water flows through 4 very narrow entrances. So even around Itsukushima Shrine, you see these tides in action. I spent a lot of time on the bridge, which is always open unless they're doing something particularly carefully. But yeah, it was just fascinating. The ship is I mean, we're on Geographer next year, but sister ship with the Adventurer, and just watching how the ship operates to me was very interesting. Anyway, Itsukushima Shrine stands in the middle of the inland sea. So it's the shrine itself is extant from the Heian period, from the 12th century. Truly amazing. People think, oh, it's a sacred island, it should have a shrine. What was actually going on was that the first warrior family to take control of Japan in the late 12th century, they had their food bowl in the Saga area of Kyushu, which we will visit at Sasebo, and they needed to monitor the shipping lanes. And so they used this island and the lookout on top of the island, which if you want to visit, you can on the tour, to monitor the shipping lanes. And to protect the island, they built this beautiful shrine. On top of the hill that we visit, we can also visit the eternal flame that was lit by the great priest Kukai, and that is the flame that lights the flame at the Hiroshima Memorial Park. Thanks, Will. And on to Hiroshima, a very special visit. This is the exhibition building. This is not the Hypo Center, which is about 200 meters to the right above the Shima Hospital. And they were going to pull this building down, but the designer of the Memorial Park, the great father of modern Japanese architecture, Tange Kenzo, insisted that it stay, and he centered the Memorial Park on this building. And then he built the magnificent Peace Museum, which sort of the concrete nature of the building sort of has been looked at by Ando Tadao, and you see a lot of concrete buildings used in contemporary architecture today. They're all looking at this Peace Memorial. Of course, the contents are also very important. And it's just a joy to stroll through a city that has turned hatred into they decided to use that emotion to send a message to the world that this must never happen again. So it's a very positive, very beautiful city. Thanks, Will. And then on to Karatsu, which I mentioned before. Karatsu means the port facing the continent or facing China. We visit the castle here. Now, this castle is a reconstruction, but it was first built in 1603, and the feudal lord who moved here moved from the nearby Nagoya castle, not to be mistaken with the city of Nagoya. But we look at the history of that castle, because that castle was used for the invasion at the end of the 1500s by Toyotomi Hideyoshi of Korea. And this links into our visit into Korea and our assessment of Korea-Japan relations. The coastline around Karatsu is very beautiful. And we visit the Nanatsugama coastline, literally the 7 cauldron coastline. And this sea is known for its very rough conditions, and the sea has eroded these beautiful caves into the limestone coast. Thanks, Will. And then we're sort of heading towards Korea, and Tsushima was ruled by the So clan, and they were responsible all through the Edo period from the 1600s to the late 1800s for Japan's trade with Korea. And so they have a very special, very close relationship with Korea. And many, many Korean tourists visit this island and all climb up, as we do, this hill to enjoy the view. There are about 100 small islands that make up what is known as Tsushima Island. We also visit a very beautiful temple, the Tutelary Temple of the So clan. And if you so desire, most people were up for a climb up the steps to the family's graveyard. But also there's a very beautiful shrine if you head down towards the coastline, which is on the flat. So there were two options for the walk that day. Thanks, Will. And then we cross into Korea. We actually enter Korea, clear customs and immigration into Korea, and visit very beautiful Jeju. And there's some options for tours on Jeju. Some people decided to go to Jeju. The whole of the island is a geopark, very important, and the most spectacular lava caves are on this island. But also there was an opportunity to visit local villages and talk to the local guides, and I was keen to sort of examine the Korea-Japan relationship, both from a historical point of view, but also a contemporary view. And the Koreans have a very different view to the Japanese, of course, which was really interesting to explore. Thanks, Will. Just watching the time. Then back to Shikoku and Matsuyama. This is one of the 12 National Heritage listed castles. It's an original castle from the Edo period. The keep burnt down at the end of the Edo period, but was rebuilt within the Edo period. So it fits within the 12 national treasure castle sites. And on this day, we also explore a very important temple to the 88 temples pilgrimage, Ishiteji. I did this pilgrimage, when I was 20 without any money. I begged. The locals kept me alive. It took me 2 months to walk around the 1,200 kilometers of the pilgrimage. So I have a very soft spot for Shikoku. And it's a very important temple in the foundation myths of the 88 temples pilgrimage. It's why we do reverse pilgrimage, and Ishite means the stone in the hand, and a key person in the founding of the pilgrimage was reborn with this little stone in his hand. The stones you can see in the temple, if you look at the size of the stone, you really realize it's just mythology, but it's a very interesting story. Thanks, Will.
Thank you, John. And so we're rapidly approaching our time. So without further ado, move on to our third and final itinerary that make up the kind of three predominantly Japan-focused itineraries in this particular cruise series. So through Japan's Ryukyu Islands, I hope I pronounced that right, John. 16 nights Fukuoka to Keelung over in Taiwan, and again departing in October 2024. Do you want to go straight into the slides, or?
Oh no, I'll stay on this one for a moment, and I've got 7 minutes, I think. So, and this was the cruise that I was on for the entire cruise. I loved it. I had a fantastic time. The expedition leader was amazing. Her crew were great, all 23 years of age. I was the oldie. We had two other great lecturers on board, a marine expert, Mike, who was amazing, and a history expert from Harvard, and we just had a great time together. So it's a pity I don't have more time, but it was fantastic. That's all I need to say. But just to make the point that we talk about Ryukyu Islands, in fact, we're visiting two prefectures, Kagoshima and Okinawa Prefecture. So it's more than just visiting the Okinawan island chain, and we visit. Let's skip through the slides. We visit Yes, I mean there is. Well, no, yeah. If we could just, our first visit is actually Nagasaki, and this is a great day. This is adventure. Is this our day in port?
No, that's not a photo
No,
of
no,
our
that's
ship.
not our ship. I was wondering. We had a photographer on board. I was wondering how he got up there. He did use his drone a lot, and has provided us with some amazing photographs. But it's such a beautiful city to visit. We go up to the top of the mountain on the left-hand side there, where you can see the communication towers, the white and red towers, look down upon the city. It's one of the three great night views of the world, with Hong Kong and Rio de Janeiro. And then in the afternoon is dedicated to the atomic bomb experience. We go to the museum, but we do spend a lot of time walking around the Peace Park there as well, which is very pleasant. Maybe if we go back, Will, one slide, then we're yes, we've got great diving. I'll talk about that in a moment. So next slide. Yes, okay. So looking at Ryukyu culture, this was a kingdom that traded with China. They actually had, more influence from China, but in the early Edo period, they became a suzerainate of Japan. Japan was very careful to allow them to continue their trade with China, and so the culture is very interesting. It's this mixture of the original Okinawan Ryukyuan culture with China and with Japan. I'll just mention Naha on this slide. The Naha Day was fantastic. It took them 30 or 40 years to rebuild the Shuri Castle, and just a few years ago, the castle burnt down, and it was just a devastating incident for the people of Okinawa. But we visit the castle site, and it is actually an amazing visit because they've been so generous with opening up the site to the carpentry that's going on, all of the traditional techniques that are being used to rebuild the building, and the pace at which they're rebuilding is incredible. And there's a big section on how they're training all of the young carpenters. And of course, the Japanese joinery is just amazing to witness. And so you can actually witness this rebuilding of this very important structure. Thanks, Will. Got some great free time in Naha as well. And then on to Yakushima. This was a great day. Everyone loved it. Heaviest rainfall in Japan, very poor quality soil, but the Cryptomeria japonica grow in this soil, and when they go through 1,000 years of age, what happens is they sort of self-pickle themselves, and the oil content in the wood goes over 10%. And so some of the trees are up to 7,000 years old. And we split up into 3 groups, and we do either very easy walks, which were actually, I led, and were really lovely because we could just sit and enjoy the forest. And the people who are keen to get out there and tread over lots of tree roots, they said, well, they didn't actually spend much time communing with the forest. So everyone sort of regretted not coming with me and just having an easy walk. Anyway, it's an amazing day and really well organized. Thanks, Will. Sorry, I've got Nagasaki. Kagoshima, this was a great day. We all went across to Sakurajima, the active volcano. Later in the trip, we circumnavigate Suwanosejima, and it was at breakfast time. That's an active volcano as well. But we got some good puffs as we arrived with the beautiful sunrise into port, and there are some great walks. Everyone really enjoyed the walks through the lava fields, and mostly flat, so very easy walking. And then we had some free time in town after a visit to the very beautiful strolling gardens of the feudal lord, which are just to the left of the city there. Thanks, Will. Amami-Oshima was fantastic. The locals, it was great to sort of, I should have worn my Coral Expeditions t-shirt today. you know, we were flying the Australian flag for the first time that an Australian ship had arrived at most of these ports. The welcome we got was amazing, and you just felt proud to be Australian and visiting these places for the first time. The cultural visit, village visit on Amami Oshima is fantastic. There was some kayaking options as well on the island, and I led a little walk up the hill to overlook the mangroves where our, our friends were kayaking. Thanks, Will.
I'll let you pronounce this one.
Okino Erabu Jima. So I led the walk out to this beautiful coastline. It was such a beautiful day. If there are any questions about weather, I'll preempt you. The weather for this cruise was just perfect. Lovely time of year. You know, we're in t-shirts. In Nagasaki, we went up the top of that hill. That was a cold day, so you do need to bring warm clothing as well. And there was a group that split off and did the caving as well, and we had options for snorkeling. Thanks, Will. Yoronjima, you can see the island is split up. There's a beautiful red soil on the island, and most of the agriculture is sugarcane. So we visited the sugarcane factory. Beautiful scuba diving and snorkeling. I actually got in the water. I'm not a water baby. Dawn, our expedition leader, is a total water baby, and she passed out when she saw me in the water. But I did go for a snorkel, and there was a drop off on the reef, and it was spectacular. I just sort of lost my breath snorkeling of the beauty of that dive on this day. Thanks, Will. And then into Okinawa, I mentioned the castle. We had a free dinner in town this night. You could come back to the ship if you wanted to. The ship berth's right in town. It's easy to get back to. And lots of people chose to have a meal in town, which was exciting. I sort of showed people a few of the options for meals in town. Thanks, Will. So Amami was fantastic. The diving on this island. Yes. Yeah. I enjoyed the snorkeling on this day as well. Thanks, Will. Miyako-jima. This is a beautiful island that is linked by 3 really impressive bridges, and there were options for diving, for swimming. I led a walk out to a sinkhole, which was very beautiful, and then in the afternoon we visited a cultural village. Again, the locals were incredibly friendly. Then I think we all went swimming in the afternoon at a resort, and the reason for that, I was tried to encourage everyone to go, was because there was a beautiful hot spring at the resort, and many of us went to the hot spring just to soak and relax for the rest of the afternoon. There were 2 options: to get naked on the men's side or the women's side. The middle pools, you could wear your bathing costume. So everyone felt comfortable, and it was such a relaxing afternoon. It was people understood why the hot springs of Japan are so important to Japanese culture. Thanks, Will. I've got to finish. We'll keep going. Ishigaki was great. Yes, we ran into a little bit of weather. So this year we didn't get to Yoronjima, but you know, that's the beauty of, you know, the weather dictates what we do. The waves were pretty high, so we stayed in the safety of Ishigaki Island, which was great because Taketomi.
I've lost your sound, John.
Scuba divers were very happy, and they, you know, were able to also experience to Kilo.
If you, I keep losing your sound, John. Anyway, I think we've lost John's sound briefly, or that keeps popping in and out. That's actually perfect timing, actually, because it was the last slide in the presentation, similar to when I showed you the kind of preceding tour to the Yap to Tokyo itinerary. If any of you arrive from Fukuoka into Keelung to finish that beautiful itinerary and just want to stay on board, then Keelung to Manila is the next stage of our kind of small islands of Japan and the Philippines. So you'll see particularly the second part of the last itinerary we just spoke about, but also a lot in the Yap up to Tokyo. If you've got an interest in snorkel, scuba, paradise beach time, beach lazing, just swimming in crystal clear waters, then this is going to be, you know, of interest to you. 16 nights, Keelung to Manila. It's called the Island Trails of the Philippines, and as you can see from the map there, we go to some really off the grid, remote, unexplored islands, predominantly in the Philippine archipelago. And like I say, if you would like to tack on an additional itinerary to one of those Japanese itineraries, then obviously feel free. But it's absolutely designed to highlight the absolute stunning islands, atolls, and coastlines of the enormous Philippine archipelago. Again, this is a relatively brief overview. We try and keep to 45 minutes, which we're aware that we've gone over just a little bit, guys. Please, that's right. Please jump on the website. We give you full detailed itineraries, photos, images, videos, that type of thing. Please reach out to our genuinely awesome reservation and service team based up in Cairns, who are now back online after dropping out for 24 hours or so due to the cyclone Jasper that pounded them for the last 48 hours. Or alternatively, please get your chosen travel agent to reach out to us on your behalf, basically. That brings us to the end of today's presentation. I've had a few questions pop up during the prezo. I'll cover some of them have been asked more than once, so I'll cover those. But like I say, if we don't have time to cover them all, we'll reach out to you directly after this presentation. We record all our webinars, so again, if you've had to, you've joined late, left early for whatever reason, we'll send you a link to the recording, and please peruse and have a rewatch to your heart's content. But one of the questions that's come up multiple times, scuba diving. So you'll have noticed, obviously, that in many of those itineraries, we've got amazing beach and water time from the islands of Micronesia, but also obviously the Philippines and some of those Japanese islands. So scuba diving is an option that we offer across the Coral Fleet, all three of our ships. Obviously, highly limited / doesn't happen when you're in the Kimberley for obvious saltwater crocodile reasons. But when we take our ships to those areas that are, you know, just purpose designed to get in and under the water, like the Barrier Reef, the Philippines, Raja Ampat, then absolutely we encourage you to get in the water to your heart's content. Snorkel gear is provided to you all on the day that you join the cruise. You get to keep it for the duration of your cruise, but we just ask if you kindly give it back to us at the end. If we've got any keen scuba divers out there, please, at the time of booking, or if you've already reserved your spot on a ship and haven't mentioned scuba, please give a call to our service team or get your travel agent to do so. It does need to be pre-reserved, so to speak, just so we can ensure that we've got all the necessary equipment for the numbers that are interested in doing some scuba. We don't sadly offer an introduction to scuba or you know, one of those standard 4-day, you know, PADI open water courses. So it is just for qualified scuba divers. But if you're qualified, I highly, you know, recommend you jump on one of these trips, you know, through the islands of the Philippines. Absolutely spectacular. But also Yap to Tokyo with the atolls, Uliti Atoll, Sorel and Faye Island. Some absolutely superb scuba diving opportunities for you guys out there who can think of nothing worse than getting, you know, 20-25 meters under the water. Snorkel opportunities are, you know, practically unlimited across most of those itineraries that we've highlighted today. So again, please reach out to us. Scuba diving is an additional cost. The Coral Expedition product, as most of you will be aware, is a predominantly all-inclusive experience. So, you know, the vast majority, if not all, of your shore excursions are included in the cost. Obviously, all your meals whilst you're aboard, alcoholic beverages, during your lunch and dinner serving included. But scuba diving is one of the very few optional but additional cost activities. A couple of you have asked, or iterations of the same have asked, how fit do you need to be to truly kind of take advantage of this kind of expedition cruising? Many of you would have cruised with this before, and I keep saying that, and I only mention that because you'll be more than aware that we cater for all abilities, basically, or within reason, all abilities. So wherever we go, be it Kimberley, Japan here, or the Philippines, and I think John mentioned in the presentation, we give you guys as our guests options. So for those of you who are looking to push the boat out, no pun intended, and go for a more kind of strenuous hike up to a viewpoint or point of interest, there's options for you. But there are plenty of options there if you just want to go for a short and leisurely, beach comb, or like John mentioned, in some of those ancient, UNESCO heritage cedar forests. We have shorter, more chilled out options, but we have those options as well if you want to, put a pair of hiking boots and head over. And that's exactly the same whether or not we're cruising in the Kimberley, in Tasmania, in South Australia, in the Philippines, or in Japan that we're doing today. We like to cater to all kind of physical abilities, and also we like to cater to all kind of personal preferences when it comes to the history, cultures, and kind of knowledge sharing. So hopefully that answers that one. A couple of you have asked about Wi-Fi, with one of you saying it was non-existent when you cruised with us a couple of years or so ago. So yeah, I would agree with you. If you jumped on a Coral Expeditions ship a couple of years or so ago, the Wi-Fi, particularly when we go, which we do most of the time, to these really kind of remote wilderness areas, would have been practically non-existent. Coral have spent a small fortune over the last kind of 12 months or so installing the Starlink, or the old Elon Musk Starlink tech across the fleet. And our Wi-Fi is now better, or according to some of my colleagues on board the ships, is now better than our head office Wi-Fi at Cairns. We offer you our standard Wi-Fi, which is included in the fare that you've paid or are considering paying. And that's going to be more than enough to cater for 99% of you. It's powerful enough to keep you in contact with friends and family, post photos and videos to social media. Excuse me, if you are one of those unlucky people that has a really important business call, or God forbid, what has the time to download Netflix movies or anything like that, you'd probably want to upgrade to our premium Wi-Fi, which does come at an additional cost. But for the vast majority of you, our standard included Wi-Fi is going to be more than enough to see you through the trip, basically, for all your personal needs. Excuse me. Last question, and it is the obligatory one, John, that you covered briefly. Just a bit of a brief overview about weather and any kind of recommended clothing that you would bring on those Japanese sections.
Yes, so the cruise through Japan itself was quite warm, but I must admit, when we started the second cruise through the third cruise in today's presentation through the Ryukyu Islands, it was pretty cold the first couple of days, and then it warmed up as we moved further south. So, in Nagasaki, it was probably 16 degrees and it was windy on the top of the mountain. So we did need warm jackets, but, for the rest of the trip, 25, 26 degrees every day. And it was just perfect. Water temperature was perfect for swimming. But yeah, unfortunately, you sort of need to pack for cold and warm. Just because of the variety of things that we're doing, and particularly if we're going up in altitude.
Well, and the good news there, which is my final comment today, is that we don't have any onboard restrictions, guys, in the amount of luggage that you can bring on board. And I'm always very surprised when I'm kind of duty manager and checking people onto various voyages occasionally that I've seen some people turn up for a 20-night trip with nothing but an overnight bag, and I've seen people turn up with literally 7, 8, 9 suitcases and everything in between. So look, within reason, we don't give you any restrictions in the amount of luggage that you guys can bring. Look, I'm going to wrap things up there. We're pretty much bang on an hour, so we've gone a little bit over, so I apologize for that, guys. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was just designed to give you a bit of an overview of the kind of Japan-centric voyages of this particular expedition cruise series. And for those of you who haven't cruised with Coral Expeditions previously, just give you a little insight into how we operate and how small ship expedition cruising operates, particularly if you've never done that type of thing before, and how completely different it is from that kind of big ship cruise experience. John, I want to say a massive thank you to you. Really appreciate you joining me again. Your Japanese knowledge and passion is clearly evident, and this presentation would be far worse without having your knowledge and wisdom imparted. So look, I really appreciate you doing it again, and to be quite frank, we're lucky to have people of your kind of caliber when it comes to your passion and knowledge on Japan on board some of our trips over there. And you are the kind of perfect embodiment of a Coral Expeditions guest lecturer. Guys, if you've got any questions out there, please reach out to your travel agent if you prefer. Reach out on the Explorat email address, or give us a call on the 1-800 number, and we are more than happy to answer any and all questions that you may have. For any of you that have booked on to our next year's Japan cruise season, you're going to have an absolutely fantastic trip. For those of you who are kind of still umming and ahhing over what your travel options are going to be in 2024, hopefully this has got you intrigued on Japan and the wider region, and we would love to see you on board soon. Thank you again, John. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you who have joined today, and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the weekend. Cheers, guys.